Everybody to have their seat, please. How many we got? We got enough?
Dr. Beebe is present. Ms. Bopey? Here. Ms. Bopey is present. Ms. Bradford? Here. Ms. Bradford is present. Mr. Garvey? Mr. Garvey is not present, but he is here. So, Mr. Gio?
Present.
Mr. Gio is present. Ms. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Harris is present. Ms. Hill?
Here.
Ms. Hill is present. Dr. Moranti? Present. Dr. Moranti is present. Ms. Orange Jones?
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Romer? Mr. Romer is not present. Ms. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Smith is present. You have a floor.
Thank you for that. First item, please.
The consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 5.2, 6.1, 7.1, 8.1, and 9.1.
Moved by Ms. Bradford. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Bopey, any discussion on the consent items?
I'd like to recuse myself from item 6.1.
Okay, Ms. Jones has recused herself from item 6.1. Any other discussion? Any objection to the motion? Okay, motion carries. Next item.
On page 7, item 3.1, consideration of the minimum foundation program formula for FY 2015-2016. The recommendation is to approve.
Do we have a motion to approve? Dr. Moranti, a second. Ms. Bradford. I'll give a little introduction to this. I appreciate, I'm not going to say hardcore members, but I appreciate you staying here through a long day. And obviously this particular item is of a lot of interest to many folks because it funds our secondary education system. So the recommendation that is before the board right now on the MFP is the result of the task force work that met this fall. And I thought it was another very positive experience. We had good dialogue. We didn't always have agreement. But we had the more than the majority of many of the members voting in favor of this, certainly the majority of the members in favor of the task force recommendations. The recommendation that's before you today, and I believe you received in the last week or so this proposed recommendation, is really centered around the task force recommendations. And I'll briefly outline those, and I'm sure Superintendent White would have a few comments. And what I'd say after that is we'll go to public comment, and then we'll have a discussion from the board. I'm going to focus on the increases from last year's funding. The first recommendation is the formula we would increase by the unmet needs of the high-cost services pool for students with most significant disabilities by $5.4 million. That was a direct recommendation from the task force, and it would go into the level 4 of the MFP. We would add $2.6 million to support the oversubscribed course choice demands, in particular dual enrollment and career education courses. So that would go to level 4. We had a recommendation in the task force relative to the 2.75 increase that has historically been there for a long time, for many years. But what we put in there was that the BESE leadership would dialogue with the legislature, and we would see what we thought would be a good recommendation for this body to present to the legislature. We know what the fiscal issues are with the state, and I have come to learn working with this over the last few years. This is a real challenge. You're trying to make an intelligent recommendation. You have a legislature that's got to deal with the dollars, and this year it looks like the dollars are very extreme. So with the feedback, meeting with the legislative leadership, what is in the formula right now is that rather than increasing a recommendation at 2.75, it would be 1 3/8, which really comes from funding the teacher pay raise from the 2013 legislative mandated pay raise that was in the 2013 session. We think that's a responsible recommendation that's tied specifically to an action that would support the teachers who are working hard to make progress each day. So it's not the 2.75, it's the 1.375 tied to supporting that increase. And finally, there was a lot of discussion, there has been in the last couple of years, about the adequacy of funding secondary education. And we have a recommendation here that we had about $140,000 that were being considered for studying the retirement system. It was before the board at the last meeting. It didn't pass. And what we're recommending doing is to move that $140,000 to have a comprehensive study of the MFP structure to come back with recommendations. So that's the overview of it, and Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing that I would add is that the recommendation from the task force on the annual consideration of an increase in the base per pupil was that we would ideally have a 2.75% increase, but all of that should be subject to a dialogue with the legislature. We have dialogued with legislative leadership and came away with the conclusion that there is not in the budget a responsible request at this moment in time for a full 2.75. At the same time, that there are things that we should protect, and that we should protect the teacher pay raises that the legislature set into motion in 2013. This does that entirely. Secondly, that it protects students with the most significant disabilities and those students that are taking their studies beyond into dual enrollment type courses. Those are populations of people that we wanted to protect, even as the legislature indicated to us that they were in difficult financial times. But I think most important is this is just one step in a very long process. And quite frankly, I think we all know this process does not get resolved by March or by April or by May. This is a June resolution. It's going to come down to the last days of the legislative session. And so this is just an expression of what we value at this moment in time, of what we think the most important and needed costs are at this moment in time. It is not the idea that a demand from the legislature. This is an ongoing dialogue. If they feel like we didn't quite get it right, they can send it back, as they did last year, with guidance, and we will consider that guidance as to whether or not we should make changes. So this is just part of an ongoing discussion with the legislature, and your approving this today is not an endorsement, high, low, or anywhere in between. It is saying this is what we value, this is what the cost we think is needed in a minimum foundation, and the start of a dialogue with the legislature. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And just last thing I would add would be the proposed increases amount to about $44 million, and that's in addition to about the $34.5 million because of the student count increases in the state that's already within the governor's proposed budget. We'll go ahead to public comments. Scott Richard.
Thank you, Chairman Guillotte. Scott Richard, LS Louisiana School Boards Association. We agree with Superintendent White on this proposal, that it falls short. Over 7 years ago, before your time, many of you on the board, promises were made to the children of Louisiana that a 2.75 increase would be provided in Level 1 funding for the MFP. Had that promise been kept, we'd be in a much better place now, likely. We'd also like to recognize that this is the first time since 2008 that BESE has actually proposed an increase in Level 1 funding without being prompted to do so by the legislature. In fact, the 2013 legislature increased funding for public education despite BESE not asking for it in this process. So we agree it falls short, and we'd like to see the increase that was discussed in the MFP task force. We'd also request that all language with regards to new Type 2 charters from the proposal be removed and amend Step 2 to fund Type 2 charter schools as legacy Type 2 charter schools are funded. This proposal would not reduce the funding for any Type 2 charter school in the state. Rather, it simply returns the funding methodology to the original funding methodology in the statutes, a funding methodology that was followed for several years. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments, Mr. Richard. Mike Falk, Superintendent Falk.
Before he begins his presentation.
Yes, Dr. Beebe.
Well, are we just discussing level one? Because I can wait, does it matter? Well, I just have this question. My recollection.
Dr. Beebe, do you mind putting the microphone up?
Oh, I'm sorry. My recollection, that there were the special schools like NOCA, Louisiana School for the Math. Didn't we remove those last year from the MFP?
No, private schools were removed from the MFP by the courts, but those public schools remain in the MFP. All public schools remain in the MFP. School for the Deaf and Visually Impaired, Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts.
Okay, well, what about, so with NOCA and the...
NOCA,
I thought there were
yes.
4 schools that there was a conversation last year, and they didn't want it included in the MFP, so they said they would fund them outside of the MFP. I'm almost certain that occurred.
We can validate that, Dr. Beebe.
There was a provision in the original resolution last year that addressed those 4 entities that after discussions and review of the resolution, they were removed. Okay? It was a level 1 funding and a level 2 funding issue, and that's what happened to those 4 schools. There was some language in the resolution, and checking this year's proposed resolution to the resolution last year, everything is basically remaining the same with the exception of the increases in level 4 that the superintendent mentioned and the language in the resolution that deals with the base per pupil amount, the $39.61 with a 1.375 increase.
And just to follow up, thank you for the clarification, Mr. Falk. But with the litigation that's occurring between Iberville and BESE, the state, so to include that in the MFP resolution, without including the type 2 legacy shorters, is that? I mean, we don't know what the ruling
I understand
will be.
Mr. Richard's policy position. Obviously, we disagree. But I think maybe the area where we can find common ground is that the court is going to rule on this issue. The judge has said he's going to rule on this issue May 15th, and then there would either be time to take appropriate action in the courts or take appropriate action vis-a-vis the formula. So I think that issue is somewhat out of our hands. The court is going to decide on that question.
Okay, thank you.
Superintendent Falk.
Yes, and I accused Mr. Romer of delaying conversation on this matter to where I would leave, but I told him I was back and I would stick around. I'm Michael Falk, Superintendent of Schools in Central, and I'm representing the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. We appreciate the effort that is being made to address the high needs, to address the supplemental course. I think evidence will show that more students have been served, more needs have been met. I'm here today to advocate for our group and superintendents across the state the 2.75% increase. And we have several reasons why. 6 of the last 8 years, we did not receive any increase in the base per pupil. We all know about the retirement issue, the unfunded accrued liability, and employers, school systems, have had their percentage increase from 15.5% to 28.0% this past year. The increase that we received in the MFP in the 2013-14 school year was done outside of the formula. It was done by the legislature, and it was mandated that 50% of that money went to the teacher salaries coded in 112 category on the AFR. The school systems could use the other 50% as they chose. Many did things for their support workers. Others who did not do things for their support workers used it to address growing training requirements, technology, and other areas. The base per pupil was increased last year by 2.75 to where it went to $39.61. But the stipulation in the resolution was that the teacher salary increases funded by the additional funds were to be sustained. The majority of school systems have built that supplement into a permanent part of the teacher salary schedule, so that cannot be removed. There are still a few other systems that are giving it as a supplement, but they're making sure that the teachers receive that allotted amount. All districts were required to provide pay-for-performance stipends based on evaluations of teachers and the value-added model. Things have changed in the middle of that stream, and teachers are still expecting pay-for-performance supplements. All districts have incurred increased costs in the areas of professional development to enhance instruction, additional resources, classroom resources to enhance instruction, additional costs for formative assessments to develop benchmarks so that we can monitor student and teacher performance and progress being made towards addressing objectives. And then finally, increased expenditures for technology enhancements. We're finding more of our districts are having to supplement the food service program in their local district because of changing regulations. There's a requirement that has been in the formula for a number of years that you must give at least 1% of your MFP amount to the food service department so that they can operate. Many districts are giving much, much more than that. And finally, the health care costs being provided to employees are increasing on an average of 6 to 8%. Appreciate the provision of the 1.375. We can't diminish that it's not important. However, due to circumstances that we've had to deal with as school systems the last 8 years, we felt that we had to advocate for the full 2.75%. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your giving me the opportunity.
Appreciate your comment, Superintendent Falk. Thank you. Mr. Monahan?
Thank you, Chairman Gilliott, members of the committee. I know the hour grows late, and I share Mr. Falk's concern that sometimes the waiting game becomes intolerable and the audience leaves. It's always curious, though, the audience leaves before the most important show in town is right before us, a $3.5 billion question into a near-empty house. To the point, we definitely understand that, I at least appreciate that there's an attempt here for this board to demonstrate a reasonable response to what is viewed now as an extremely precarious fiscal position for the state of Louisiana. The problem I have as a member of the MFP task force who sat through all those great discussions, reason in the face of unreasonable and irresponsible fiscal policies do nothing to benefit the children of Louisiana or to do anything more than buy another year that we attempt to limp through and do the best we can. The pay raises that we do respect that the money has been placed in there, the 1.37% amount to in that year. It was a range of $190 to $1,200 for teachers. To be appreciative and to be gracious is my nature, but let's be honest about the money that we're talking about. It hasn't done anything to keep up with inflation for our teachers, and it basically ignores the fact that we have folks that clean and cook and do all the other things that happen in the school system. So I'll end with basically saying this. I don't think I'm being unreasonable to suggest to you that the fiscal policies that create this compromised position are avoidable. As long as there is a book of tax expenditures that is thicker than the good book that includes lots of undebated, uncontested breaks to business and folks we don't know, we haven't set the priorities, and I would submit we haven't set the priorities of this state yet. If we're going to gut higher ed at the expense of a revenue-neutral fiscal policy that is imposed or has been imposed by pledges that individuals have made to K Street lobbyists, and you all read the papers as much as I have, then the state is being held hostage to a discussion that has to be had and will be had, if not in this fiscal session, it will be had as we cycle into October and there are elections statewide. It's unconscionable. It is obscene that we're saying we can't meet the obligations that we have or do the things we should do for children while we can sanction exemptions in the rest. I've said this before. I find it most disappointing. Thank you, Mr. Gilliard. This is not an attack on you, sir, or the committee, or the work we try to do. It is a reality of the state of Louisiana that continues from generation to generation. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Moynihan, and assure you we don't take it personally. We're all in favor. If there's more money, then we'll be all there fighting with you.
Thank you.
Okay? Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Chairman Guyot, and the
Yes,
rest
sir.
of the committee. I put support and oppose on my card because I want to thank y'all and the MFP task force for increasing the high cost pool by $5.4 million. The need.
I may have to, we may have to take a picture of this. Excuse me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Green card.
Because there needs to be more funding for the high cost. For those, to make sure we understand what we're talking about, these are for students whose cost of education exceeds 3 times the average of the MFP, or about $33,000, more than $33,000. And districts submit applications and say, can you, and this has been historically how it's been done. Last year, there was $4 million in the pot, and that funded half of the request. This year, y'all had added $4 million, so there's about $8 million in the pot, and that handled 40%, less than 40% of the need. And this is our minimum foundation program, the amount of money to support the minimum education needs of students. Last year I was sick during this committee meeting, and I was at home, and I got a bunch of texts because somebody testified that, well, you know, when people go to IP meetings, that's individualized education program meetings, money's not an issue with the program. If it's determined the student needs it, it's supposed to be on the table. And what was said was, and it wasn't clear was that from that school, but a kid wasn't getting the service because they didn't have the resources. Well, we realized that schools weren't asking for the resources, and we told them you better start asking. Because I hear from parents who say, I'm being denied services. But now school systems are increasingly asking for the appropriate amount of resources, and these are kids who need medical, they need extensive support structures in place, they need assistive technology, they need equipment, and without the resources they fall behind, and they cost society more as they age. So this investment is not just for now, it's for the long term. And so while $5.4 million increase is truly appreciated, I really want to, I can't stress that enough, it is not enough. It is clearly not enough because in your proposal is a request to have funding, about I think it's $140,000, to figure out how much does it cost to educate kids. Well, you have the dollar amounts that have been submitted by school systems that say to educate the kids with the most severe needs, you've fallen short by 60% this year. Usually in the MFP, y'all go back and you make corrections and you say, you know what, if you had these kids or those kids, we'll give you money or take away money based on the true need. Y'all don't do that for kids with high cost needs. So school systems have been shorted not only with the flat line, and I fully support the 2.75% as an aside, but they've been flatlined in all their resources, but they've been shorted, just flat out shorted, what was known to be necessary to cover the cost of kids for high cost needs. So I ask y'all to amend and add a 1 in front of that 5.4 million to make it 15.4. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. And just for clarification, the $140,000, I think you've taken that out of context. That's relative to the task force committee's recommendation of not just studying the need of special kids, but
Correct.
across.
I understand that.
Okay. Thank you.
I understood that.
Okay. Thank you. I misinterpreted what you said then.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Shane Riddle.
There we go.
Yep, there you go.
Thank you. I'm Shane Riddle with the represent the Louisiana Association of Educators. Speaking on behalf of the Board of Trustees, many of the items recommended, the LAE supports, such as additional funds to meet the needs of students requiring high-cost special education services, and additional funds for dual enrollment and course choice programs, just to mention some of those. We, as an organization, will always advocate the base per pupil funding to be no less than 2.75%. But we do applaud the intent to preserve funding to allow school districts to maintain increases in teacher compensation from prior years. That's really good. It would be better if we could place that intent into the continuation clause of the MFP, which would be on page 10 of the MFP, to solidify that intent. And I believe that is it. But we do applaud that effort. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Veronica Brooks.
Hi, Veronica Brooks with the Charter School Association. I actually just wanted to reiterate something that Superintendent White said earlier. I just want to remind everyone that BESE has an obligation under the Constitution to fund all public schools, traditional public schools, charter schools, the special schools such as NOCA and whatnot. And as was stated, the court will make a final decision on this matter in May. And I just wanted to remind you that the 18,000 students that are served by Type 2 charter schools and the teachers that work with those students every day really appreciate what you're trying to do with the MFP. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Who made the original motion? Dr. Moranti, could I get you to modify the motion to also add that you'd authorize the LDE to make technical adjustments to the formula as needed and authorize the LDE to submit the formula to the legislature? And who seconded that?
Ms. Bradford.
Ms. Bradford, do you accept that? Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the recommendations that are before you. Any conversation from board members?
I'd like to offer a substitute motion.
Okay, Dr. Beebe.
I'd like to make a motion to include the 2.75% versus the one that is recommended by the task force.
Okay. Yes. Ms. Hill, you second that? Okay, we have a substitute motion to effectively take out the 1 3/8 that was based on what we were fulfill our obligation of the task force and substitute it to the 2.75. Any discussion on substitute motion?
I just have a question.
May I, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Would you like?
Superintendent.
I just wanted to respond. I think probably I speak for everybody when I'll tell you that my guidance when I've been asked has been that all of the financial needs that were expressed by Superintendent Falk, Mr. Monahan, Mr. Riddle, Mr. Richard, and so on are accurate and justifiable, and that ideally we would be able to say yes to Dr. Beebe's motion. I think I'll speak for the department and say that ideally I would agree with her motion. That motion generates $75 million in revenue needed to be produced by the state. Right now, estimates are that the higher ed system is going to be put in the hole $200 to $300 million by this budget alone, and that's still contingent on tax credits and other things being taken back that I think are still highly debatable. When I have called and spoken with legislative leadership, I believe some of you have done the same, they have advised me of that. And so I just want to say to you that I can't speak for them, obviously. I think that they would say that would be great if we could all do that, and at the same time, they are very wary of the potential calamity for higher education in particular, the more we push these liabilities like that. So I just want to give you my advice that I think as noble as that request is, it probably flies in the face of, quite candidly, the guidance I've been given from the legislature.
So how much are we talking about? 30+ million to get it to 2.75?
If to add it to 2.75, we'd be talking about another 37 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we send it over as amended in the recommendation, and it's accepted, it's not sent back, just try to help me remember how this process works. If let's say someone decides to offer a motion to take a refundable tax credit that's worth, say, 50 million and take 34 of that to put it toward the additional money to make it 2.75, is there a way that BESE could have the opportunity to be the one to accept that rather than it be done by a legislator outside, I mean, in the budget?
And maybe, and it's a good thought, Ms. Smith, and maybe one way of trying to merge those two ideas is you could put a motion in to say that if the legislature identifies additional funds to go above and beyond 1.375, then we as a board shall request that the formula be sent back so that those additional funds could be included in the formula.
Okay, so they could so they could send it back and we could include it in the MFP so that it's not done outside of the formula.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I'm concerned
That's
about,
right.
because if it's outside of the formula, it's got to be a one-time bonus, pretty much, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So I think that would be one way of addressing what I was calling the dialogue, and forgive me for not being clearer, but I think you could say as a board, we would request to be expressed to the legislature that in the event more greater funding is identified for adding to this request, that they send the formula back with guidance that we include that increase in the formula.
So are you, and I know that we can't determine this, but if we send it over like it is now, like leadership is wanting it to be sent, I'm just concerned, is there fear that they would accept it immediately, go with it, and then something would happen because, the tax refunds are going to be going through the process?
My sense, and you're certainly the legislative expert, but my sense from having watched this and having talked to people about how it's happened over the years is that this will play out in the closing days of session. This is, the second largest expenditure within this budget is the formula we're talking about here today. Obviously, even the question as to whether they can accept this formula at all will be a question for the last days of the budget negotiations as it's being worked out. Thus, I don't think there's much concern about it moving through too quickly. I think that we should express a desire to them, if what you're saying is agreed upon, to have it sent back to us in the event that there is more funding that should be included so that we can build it into the base of the formula rather than leaving it outside.
I just think we're going to see so many tax credits on the table, and I feel like we're going to see some expenditures, and I feel like there's going to be a legislator that's going to want to put that toward the MFP to give us a 275.
Maybe
But
more than one.
I definitely think it ought to be us doing it rather than outside of the formula.
Dr. Moranti?
Would it be possible if Dr. Beebe could put a teacher who's just getting a paycheck. They know, most of them are young, between the ages of 20 and 30, and they know each student has to take their academic needs farther than high school in order to achieve in life. And that's why I feel Teach for America is so important, because it's not just you're going to come here, you're going to try to make a grade. You're going to come here, you're going to try to get a high SAT score. They're going to take all your talents, and they're going to help you reach the goals you need to be. Without Teach for America, I'm not sure where I'd be going to college right now. And because of Teach for America, I'm one of 501 students out of the entire country to receive the Questbridge Scholarship this year. And that's all because of Teach for America. And without it, I'm not sure where I'd be right now.
Yeah, thank you for being here and sharing your story with us. Appreciate it. Mr. Powell? Or is it Mr. Heyman?
I'm Cordell Heyman.
Okay, I'm sorry.
From Baton Rouge. I'm an attorney, and I'm Senior Vice President with SGS Petroleum Service Corporation. But I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the board of Teach for America South Louisiana. I've been in that role now for more than 10 years and was a board member prior to being the chair. So my belief in the value of that organization, I think, is reflected in the fact that I've stayed very engaged with it for a long time. And what I've seen is the impacts that these teachers can have, not only in the traditional sense in the classroom, but a lot of the extra things that they do. And I know a lot of our other teachers who come from traditional programs do that as well. But I've had the opportunity to see the extraordinary efforts of these Teach for America teachers, and so many of them have elected to stay here, have fallen in love with our state, or have fallen in love with someone in our state, and that has caused them to remain here with us. And so it's a great and growing pipeline. The funding that we receive from you is a critical piece of our funding that we simply could not go on without. So thank you very much for your past funding and for your consideration.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Heyman, and your service as a volunteer. Is Patricia Powell here? She's not here? Okay. Next group, Ms. Berrios.
Can I just pause just 1 second?
Sure.
I just want to make sure I understand. You're going to Grinnell next year, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And I do think it needs to be said that Grinnell, unfortunately, is in Louisiana, but it's one of the top liberal arts colleges in America. Yes. And that needs note. You make us proud, and congratulations.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Berrios and Shamsed Dean. No, gone. Thomas, he's gone. Lucius Spielvogel, he's gone. Okay. I think it's you, Ms. Berrios.
Lee Berrios, retired teacher. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things. In the last 6 or 7 years, according to LaTrack, BESE has awarded over $13 million to Teach for America to supply, according to the contracts, approximately 5,000 teachers. I don't know where all those teachers have gone, but or instructors, I should say. But I wonder, and I've said this before, how much is this board allocated to advertising or recruiting certified teachers, either from within the state or from without? I know the National Board Certified Teacher Department has been decimated in the Department of Ed. So, and then of course we have the problem with paying teachers. So I'm against the use of Teach for America to supplant efforts to get certified teachers in this state, which by law are required for traditional public schools, not for charter schools. Also at the Joint Budget Committee hearing a week or two ago, cuts were announced for the remainder of this year, I believe, this fiscal year. And one of the cuts for the Department of Ed was $899,000. Excuse me, almost $500,000 for a Teach for America contract. I don't know which contract that was referring to, but here you are about to award another $1 million. I believe the word came through when Ms. Nichols was going through that reduction, that money for Teach for America could be replaced with federal funding from somewhere. I don't know what that federal funding would come from that wouldn't be funded in order to fund this Teach for America contract. So I'm against this contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berrios.
Let me just comment on that for a second. The legislature, I don't need you to stay, Ms. Berrios. I'm not asking you for a response.
Okay.
The legislature has long appropriated funds specific to this purpose. So for years, it hasn't been the BESE that has awarded funding to Teach for America. It's been the legislature. The BESE is then a pass-through agency. This year, the administration reduced some of those funds because of the budget cuts. In other words, you had a legislature that had essentially committed funding to Teach for America. Those funds were then cut mid-year. This money is federal funds that we are using to backfill so as to sustain that commitment made by the legislature before and not leave this organization hanging in the lurch.
Thank you for the clarification. Ms. Hill?
I have a couple of questions. I don't know if, I guess, Superintendent White can answer. Okay, so when we award the funding to Teach for America, their sole purpose for us awarding them $1 million is to recruit 500 teachers to Louisiana. But to my understanding, once they recruit the teachers here to Louisiana, if a student, well, if one of their core members decide, well, once they find placement for them, the school district still have to pay them a fee for recruiting that Teach for America student. But not only that, the student or the core member, I don't know, however they, whatever, but the core member also have to go through alternative certification if he or she choose to. They have to pay that out of their salary. Not only that, then if they move from another state, they allow them to get a loan to make that transition from one state to the next state. So my question is, if we're giving Teach for America $1 million contract every year, and then the school district still have to pay Teach for America to recruit the student, which we're paying them, which I think is duplication of services, and then the school district have to pay the salary for the students as well. So I'm just trying to get a clear understanding of why we keep funding Teach for America these millions of dollars when they're making money from the school district, and then they're not entitled to pay the core member because the school district has to pay the core member their salary.
I mean, you're right about all those things, although I don't see what's wrong with that. The legislature every year funds our institutions of higher education just like tuition funds those things, just like TOPS funds them. In other words,
Correct.
There are multiple sources of funding for any teacher candidate. Secondly, the reason why this program is so beneficial, I think, is twofold. And as you know, I'm an alumnus of this program.
Of course, you're going to be biased. about it.
I'm just going to give you my opinion on it.
Okay, go ahead.
First, these teachers are going into high-need districts. They're requested by their superintendents, and many of the letters that we got today were letters from superintendents to go into some of the areas that have a hard time recruiting teachers in the first place. These are urban and rural areas that have a historic challenge in recruiting teachers. Secondly, these teachers teach in high-need subject areas, and Dr. Beebe, you, more than anyone, probably should appreciate the challenge it is in finding teachers of students with disabilities. And third, they go into leadership roles, like, for example, in Orleans Parish, which is a fast-improving school system where half the principals in the city are alumni of Teach for America. Those, to me, seem like undeniable benefits. Like our higher education institutions, they are funded through a variety of funding streams, local and state, as well as private. And it's no different in that way from any other teacher candidate mechanism.
Dr. Beebe?
Is Mr. Michael Tipton in the audience?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
No, Michael Tipton. Is he here?
Yes, he's here.
Well, I think it was last year, Mr. Tipton, I did tell you that, while I did voice opposition to Teach for America, but I did say with the circumstances we now face in Louisiana with the critical teacher shortage that I would likely one day embrace Teach for America. And I will say I plan to vote for this today, ladies and gentlemen, because I've had superintendents from neighboring districts, and some have come to the table to speak in support of the core teachers, because there is a tremendous need. If you go to your universities, there's a lack of interest in education from my observations. I know that at UL at Lafayette, in the College of Education, there may be approximately 120 teacher candidates to select from. And, you know, they're not enough to go around. And that's why I've been so concerned when I look at the reform initiatives and see what it's doing to the education profession. In many classrooms, there are warm bodies. I hate to say this. And we're holding principals accountable, but there are those situations where there are individuals in the classroom where, you know, and the observation result could be negative, but who do you replace them with? So we've come to a time, and I think sometimes when we lack those experiences, we can't truly appreciate, you know, what the real situation is. And so my obligation is to students, and so I'm reconsidering. I know in the past I've voted in opposition to this contract. I do support local individuals. I would encourage individuals to go into the teaching profession, to support our local universities, but at this point it's not happening. So we do need individuals, and so I'm going to support this contract. So Mr. Tipton, today is the day.
Thank you, Dr. Beebe, for those comments. I know they were heartfelt, and I appreciate them. I did miss a card, I believe, on Ashley McReynolds, 4.1.
Good afternoon. I'm Ashley McReynolds. I'm a parent from here in Baton Rouge. I wasn't going to say, I actually wasn't planning on talking, and then the conversation came up about special education students related to Teach for America. And I wanted to share with you a very personal experience I had last year with my son's first grade teacher, who worked in the oil industry out on oil rigs for years, and had some personal stuff go on, could no longer do that field of work being a single mom. And so she decided to become a teacher, and she went through the Teach for America program. And on the third day of school of Cooper's first grade year, she came up to me and she said, I finally had some time to review Cooper's IEP, and I just wanted to let you know that I've never taught anything worse than ADHD. And my son has very, very, very rare genetic syndrome on top of some other things going on. And I just said to her, you know what? You and Cooper are both going to learn a lot this year. I ended up in early resolution for failure to maintain his behavior plan that ended up in sort of illegal suspensions over this. And while I understand the need for teachers, what they get is not enough to educate students with disabilities in inclusive settings. This teacher had no idea on how to educate my son, how to implement a behavior plan, how to implement his IEP. I ended up being a para for my child for about 5 weeks in the classroom because it was that bad. So while the need is great for teachers, I get it. My school last year went without their head special ed teacher. We didn't have a resource teacher for, I believe, about 4 months. We had a substitute teacher who couldn't even draft IEPs and sign off on IEPs. So the need is real in the districts. But if you're going to have this program that is such a short 6-8 weeks, whatever it is, to become a teacher, it's not sufficient for kids with disabilities. And in the world of inclusion today, you have more and more students with more significant needs in regular classrooms for more than 80% of the day, like my son. So I had to share it. I was just compelled to share my experience with TFA. But I understand the need. I just felt like I needed to share.
Thank you, Ashley, for coming and sharing that personal story. I do have about 10 cards that do not wish to speak in favor of the motion. Any other discussion from the board?
Can we take the two items, because I know they're together, separately? Vote on TFA contract and then vote on the Pennington Biomedical Research Center contract?
As long as the originator of the motion's fine with it, I'm certainly am. Who originated the motion?
Dr. Moranti.
Dr. Miranda, you okay with taking the two separately? Yeah, it's fine, yeah. And who seconded it?
I'll second.
Who seconded it?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Bradford.
Ms. Bradford, you okay with taking them separately? Okay, any further discussion?
Mr. Guillaume.
Yes, ma'am.
If it's the TFA contract, I'd like to ask for a report of the agencies that employ these individuals. For example, the school systems. Could you give a report?
We'd be happy to.
Okay. For the next meeting?
We'd be happy to. I think, is it in the backup? It's in my backup. The special backup.
Okay, so we're going to vote on 4.1, number 1, the approval of the, we have the Teach for America contract, and we also have the Pennington Biomedical Research Center contract. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Any objection to that motion? Motion carries.
Wait, are we, did we take it separately? That's what I...
Yes, we did. That's the first one of the two.
Okay, well, I object for the TFA contract.
Okay, Ms. Hill objects to the TFA. The second one is the deferral, item number 2. And this was regarding the proposed contract to study the retirement system, and that's being deferred. Is there any objection to deferring that? Okay, motion carries. Next item.
On page 12, item 4.2, consideration of federal, state grants and allocations to LEAs, Type 2 charters, Type 5 charters, approved non-public schools, and community-based organizations, competitive and other. Recommendation is to approve.
Do I have a motion to approve? Ms. Bophy, seconded by Dr. Moranti. We have any public comment?
Members, I would just identify that these are allocations that go directly to school systems, and they include some of our more significant programs, including our NSECD and LA4 allocations. I do want to note that in making these allocations to school programs for early childhood, we've got good news and bad news, and that is the good news is we're sending out tens of millions of dollars in preschool grants. The bad news is we're oversubscribed, and I think that's an important thing for you to note, and I credit the superintendents and their staffs. I credit our privates and our child cares and our Head Starts. They are generating more interest than we have capacity to fill. So that's good news, but we also have a problem with our funding and need to get that straight. But this is all good news for school systems, and I ask your approval.
Any discussion from the board at this time for public comment? Ms. Berrios? This is 4.2. The federal and state grants to LEAs, Type 2.
So does this include on page 14 the allocation for the student summer safety session? I think it does.
Yes, it does.
Okay. I have a question. I can't get my questions answered through public information requests, and I can't get them answered here either, but I'm going to ask anyway. I'm just wondering, it looks like this is paying for the licenses, the training so that these kids can get these licenses. This is part, I guess, of the Jump Start or course choice, industry training, and I'm just wondering how much money in the end is going to be expended toward not only providing Jump Start and course choice for kids, which I understand their need to be trained for the workforce if that's what they choose, but then to go further and pay for them to get their licensing. I don't understand why business and industry isn't at least paying their part of that. Is this going to be the typical thing that happens with the licensing of these kids? Just
to make sure I'm understanding the problem, you're saying you're concerned that we are paying a lot of money so that kids can get career credentials so they can go get a job?
No, for once they get the training, my understanding is through the school system, as part of Jumpstart. Is this part of Jumpstart, I think? Okay. Then additionally, to go further and instead of collaborating with business and industry where they pay the license because they're going to benefit from hiring these kids, are we going to be paying all these licenses and certifications for these kids at the end of their training? I mean, it's not something typically that schools do, you know, like they don't pay for them to enter college, those sorts of things, or to go to technical schools.
Now, you're referring to the certifications that are listed here, Ms. Berrios?
Yes.
Like the first aid certifications and the OSHA 10 certifications?
Yes.
Well, the certification comes as part of the coursework, so it's like tuition. We're basically paying tuition for courses.
Okay, so not only paying for the course, paying the certifications. Okay.
Any objection to the motion? Motion carries. Next item.
On page 33, item 5.1, consideration of RSD contracts and leases of $50,000 and over. Recommendation is to approve.
Do we have a motion to approve? Ms. Bradford, second. Ms. Bophy, thank you. Any discussion on this item? Any objection to the motion? Motion carries. Next item.
On page 172, item 10.1, consideration of a report regarding LDE public records requests. Recommendation is to receive.
Do we have a motion to receive? Ms. Bophy, thank you. I need a motion. Ms. Bradford, second. Mr. Romer? Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a the consideration of report regarding the public records request. Ms. Dr. Beebe, you put this on the agenda?
Well, yes, I did some months ago. I thought I was supposed to get a report. Didn't you agree to a report?
It notes here it would be verbal today.
Excuse me? I'm sorry.
My understanding is you put this on the agenda, correct?
Well, some months ago, and I thought the result of that action was to provide a report about the number of public records requests.
You're looking for a report from the department, right? Was your intent?
Yes.
I don't have anything to respond, and perhaps if there was a misunderstanding, that could be our misunderstanding. I understood that you wanted to have a discussion at this meeting about that. I know we have had one other occasion, and Aaron and Bridget, you might have to remind me of when this was on the agenda. And have we provided a listing of public records requests? Okay. Is that what you're looking for? You'd like a list?
Yes, I would like to have a report of the number of
Okay.
public
I'll tell you what, if you wouldn't mind, we could hold this over until tomorrow. We're happy to take a look and bring something back tomorrow. I apologize, I didn't understand the intention of the item.
Ms. Berrios, you have a comment card?
Well, I just wanted to, I thought the discussion was going to be on the status of the department's responding to public information requests, and I have a number of them that haven't been fulfilled. One that I filed on December 10th of 2014, and that was regarding communications with DRC, with Pearson, and with Park. And I rewrote it several times to satisfy the correct wording, but it's pretty simple correspondence between the department or Mr. White and those, and in one case specifically regarding the Park test. And I'm getting nothing, and Mr. Tom Aswell filed a similar one weeks ago and has not gotten. And he threatened to sue, and so I guess we'll have to go to court over it. But the department continues not to provide documentation or public information that's requested.
Mr. Guillaume, my apologies, and Dr. Beebe, my apologies to you. I actually do have an oral report to give to you that was provided to me by staff, so I'll provide that here, and then we can provide you a paper copy afterwards.
Okay, thank
Let me give you just a numeric rundown of the circumstances. In 2014, we had 153 requests opened, and 153 were closed. So far in 2015, we have 50 public records requests with 40 closed, and 7 to 10 are still open and being worked on. Some are duplicative. One of those, Lee, includes your park request. Some of them are that are still open are research requests for data and other information. Some are very specific, and they require just a lot of research to get to a point of responsiveness. Noel Hammett has issued a request regarding at-risk populations, and one regarding Lafayette Charter, which speculated on certain employees, and we have to go research specific employees. So I guess the answer is 40 out of 50 have been completed. The other 10 are still being worked on, including one that you have, I believe, Lee, regarding park issues, and last year was 153. I can say that the report goes on the note, and I'm happy to give this to you, Dr. Beebe, that about kind of requests that are written in a way that kind of leads the lawyers down rabbit holes because they're so broad. So some requests will include language like any and all of such and such, in which case the request tends to take a while. Also, there have been requests recently like every email that has ever been sent in the department using the term Common Core. That was one recently. So it goes back like 10 years or however long it is, and you have to find every single one. And so that's just a large request. This is a common thing with governmental agencies, but I think our rate of responsiveness is good, and we're working to make it as good as it can be.
Okay, and as a follow-up comment or question, so the legal requirement to respond within the 3 days, is that applicable to your office? And if
it is, there's a requirement that the request be responded to within 3 days. That's a different thing, however, from the all of the information being provided in response. There has to be a response within 3 days. And also there are provisions in the law that speak to overly burdensome requests. So sometimes that can lead to a dialogue with the requester where we ask the requester to try to narrow their request so that we can be responsive.
So then your office, though, you have someone responding to those individuals so that they at least, the requests are acknowledged.
Correct.
So,
yes. Yes.
Okay. So you're meeting that 3-day requirement for.
I believe in every instance we have. It certainly is our practice.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes.
I've heard that these requests are taking up a lot of time for the department employees. Can we get an estimate of how much it has cost the department in employee hours, including the overhead for those employees?
We could provide that.
A rough estimate.
Yeah.
I know you can't do it
I would
exactly.
estimate we probably have we have one full-time employee who is full-time dedicated. We probably have 3 or 4 others who are part-time dedicated. So I would say all in all we probably have 2 FTEs dedicated to public records.
And what would the salary be?
I would say all in, and then when you, so the way it works is you have staff that they meet on a virtually daily basis regarding public records requests. Their job is to go get information and assemble it. That's a different thing from Beth's shop or Kim Naismith's shop, Jessica Bagian's group, who do the research to pull the reports. I couldn't even tell you how much that is, but I just in terms of the FTEs, probably $200,000, retirement and salary all in.
But there's more in addition to that.
There is more in addition to that. Yes.
Can you just take a rough guess of how much that would cost?
$400,000.
So all told, about $500,000 a year.
No, I'd say all told $300,000 or $400,000 a year.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? Any objection to receiving the verbal report? Motion carries. That concludes admin and finance. And Mr. Garvey, when would you like to start the next committee?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. We'll start the next committee, which will be school innovation and turnaround.